Tom Harrington had always believed that the worst thing that could happen in Pine Haven Estates was a passive-aggressive note about Christmas lights left up past January 15th. At 54, he had spent 30 years locking down corporate networks for banks and defense contractors, but the idea that he would need those same skills in a neighborhood of $500,000 colonials with 3-car garages seemed laughable. Until the night he came home and found Diane Whitcomb treating his 48-amp charger like a Chevron station. The first time, he gave her the benefit of the doubt. Diane was late 40s, severe platinum bob, the kind of woman who could make namaste sound like a threat. She flashed that practiced junior league smile and said, "Green infrastructure should be for the greater good, Tom. We're saving the planet 1 kilowatt at a time." Then she let the J1772 handle drop onto his pavers hard enough to chip one. He picked it up, coiled it neatly, and told himself it was a one-off. It wasn't. 3 nights later she blocked his garage completely. Ellen sat in the passenger seat of their Model Y, arms folded so tight her knuckles went white. "That woman is unbelievable," she muttered. Tom marched across the street and knocked. Greg Whitcomb opened the door looking like a man who slept in the guest room more often than his own bed. "She said you two worked it out," Greg whispered, eyes pleading for this to not become a scene. "The only thing worked out is that my driveway is not a public parking lot." Diane appeared behind him in a silk robe that probably cost more than Tom's first car. "If you're in such a hurry, text me next time." Honestly, the drama. Ellen stepped forward. "This is theft of services, Diane. And trespassing." Diane's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Theft? I'm topping off. You people lock your Wi-Fi, but cry when someone borrows a little electricity? Typical." Tom gave her 10 seconds to move the car. She took 9.5, then peeled out hard enough to leave black streaks across his Belgian block apron. That night he poured 2 fingers of Knob Creek, stared at the ceiling, and felt something cold and precise crystallize in his chest. He had spent his career designing systems that didn't just stop intruders, they made intruders regret ever trying. Diane had declared war on a man who built bear traps for a living. At 2:17 a.m., he was in his office, monitors glowing blue. The charger's API was wide open to its owner, child's play for someone who once locked a Russian botnet out of a major pipeline for fun. 4 hours and 1 pot of coffee later, Porcupine was born. It checked the vehicle handshake, compared it against a white list of exactly 2 MAC addresses, his car and Ellen's, and if anything else touched the handle, it did 3 things simultaneously. 1. Dropped the contactor, 0 volts, 0 danger. 2. Sent the car a critical fault code that triggered the mechanical lock on the charging port. 3. Logged everything with a date-time stamp and a nice clear video clip from the 4K driveway camera. He tested it on his own car first. Worked perfectly. Then he went to bed smiling for the first time in a week. Diane struck again on a Wednesday. Tom watched the whole show from his phone while pretending to read emails at the office. She pulled in at 8:03 p.m., plugged in, went inside. At 8:47 she came out in Lululemon, Pilates mat under one arm, and tried to leave. The handle would not release. She yanked. She slapped the button. She opened the frunk, closed the frunk, opened the driver's door, closed it again. Nothing. The charging light stayed dead black. The doorbell rang at 9:05. Diane stood on his porch with Greg trailing behind like a whipped dog. "Your charger has imprisoned my car," she announced. Tom opened the door just wide enough to be polite. "That's strange. Worked fine for me at 6. It's locked. I have a class." He stepped out, hands in pockets, and delivered the performance of his life. Calm, concerned, deeply sorry. Explained how modern safety standards required the car to lock the handle in the presence of a critical fault. Explained that only the charger owner could clear the code. Explained that clearing it would make him personally liable for any future battery fire, and his insurance carrier had been very clear on that point. Diane went through the 5 stages of grief in about 45 seconds. Greg aged 10 years on the spot. "So what will it take?" she finally whispered. Tom disappeared inside and came back with 2 sheets of paper. The first was a 1-page trespass acknowledgement and permanent waiver. The second was an invoice for $500 labeled after-hours emergency diagnostic and release fee. Diane called him every name she could think of. Greg begged. "Old mister." Larson next door turned his porch light on to get a better view. Diane saw the red recording light on the camera, looked at the growing audience, and realized she was cornered. She signed with a scribble that looked like a seismograph during an earthquake. She Venmoed the money while literally shaking with rage. Tom waited a full 5 minutes, long enough for her to feel every second, then tapped 1 key. Across the street came the beautiful metallic thunk of the lock releasing. Diane ripped the handle out, slammed it to the ground, and left half the rubber on his driveway getting away. For 9 glorious days the street was quiet. Then the cream envelopes started arriving from the Pine Haven Homeowners Association. First his front door was federal blue, instead of colonial blue. Then the garden hose reel was plastic instead of wrought iron. Then Ellen's porch flag was 21 inches instead of the allowed 18. Each note is signed by Diane Whitcomb, concerned resident. Tom realized the charger had only been round 1. Diane had simply changed arenas to one where she held all the cards, the HOA rulebook. He could fight each citation and watch fines stack up like cordwood, or he could go nuclear. He chose nuclear. For 72 straight hours he lived on coffee and spite. He ingested the entire 280-page CC and RS until he could recite mailbox paint codes in his sleep. He bought access to the county GIS server. He walked every street at dawn with a laser measure and a Canon with a zoom lens. By the time he was finished, he had photographed, GPS stamped, and cited 312 separate violations. Diane's new stamped concrete driveway extension violated setback by 14 inches and directed runoff straight into Mr. Larson's prize roses. The HOA president, Walter Beaumont, had an unpermitted koi pond the size of a kiddie pool. Half the mailboxes on Maple Lane hadn't been repainted since the Clinton administration. He compiled it all into a 180-page bound report that looked like it came from a Big Four accounting firm, complete with executive summary, color photographs, and penalty tables. He mailed Walter his copy on a Monday. On Tuesday night, he and Ellen walked the neighborhood after dark and slid a one-page summary into every mailbox. Wednesday, the Facebook group exploded. Thursday, Walter called an emergency meeting. Friday night, the clubhouse was packed so tight the fire marshal would have had a stroke. Walter tried to open with a speech about personal vendettas. He didn't get past sentence 3 before George Larson stood up waving the summary sheet like a battle flag. Are we tearing out my wife's rose trellis next, Walter? Because according to page 7, that's a violation too. The room detonated. Walter pounded his little gavel until it splintered. Tom waited until the noise crested, then walked to the front, laid the full report on the table with a thud you could feel in your teeth, and spoke for exactly 4 minutes. He moved for immediate blanket amnesty on all past violations, a vote of no confidence in Walter Beaumont, and the creation of a resident committee to drag the covenants into the 21st century. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. The vote was 114-3. Walter turned the color of oatmeal and resigned on the spot. Diane sat in the front row looking like someone had unplugged her life support. For weeks later, on a perfect October Saturday, a flatbed carrying a bobcat and 2 jackhammers parked in front of the Whitcomb house. Diane stood in her doorway in sunglasses and a bathrobe while her $18,000 driveway was reduced to rubble because, in the end, the same rules she weaponized against everyone else worked just fine when the community decided to use them on her. Tom and Ellen sat on their porch swing drinking coffee and watching the show. Mr. Larson walked by with his ancient beagle and tipped an imaginary hat. Morning, Tom. Justice has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Tom raised his mug in salute. His front door was still federal blue. His charger still worked perfectly. And every night when he plugged in, he slept like a man who finally understood that sometimes the best revenge isn't personal at all. It's letting the monster choke on the same rope it tried to hang you with. So now I'm asking you, honestly, when someone refuses to leave you alone, when they keep moving the goalposts and daring you to do something about it, where's the line? Is there ever a point where measured, overwhelming response stops being revenge and starts being simple self-defense? Or do we keep turning the other cheek until there's nothing left of us? I still think about that some nights. Tell me where you would have drawn the line, because I genuinely want to know. Drop it in the comments. I read them all.